All right, fourth graders, it's Mr. Rogers here, and we are about to begin my favorite lesson in electricity. And the reason why this is one of my favorite activities is not only is it neat to kind of add and take away different components, but it's also a lot of critical thinking. So you're gonna stick with me. This is gonna be a pretty hard video to follow along every single part. So make sure you're sticking with me each and every way. So up until this point, we have really talked about what happens when we have one energy source and one light bulb. And that is what we've known as our standard circuit. So yeah, we've upgraded from our cell and our bulb and our single wire into our bulb holder and our cell holder using those Fahrenstock clips. And what happens is when I put it into my cell holder, my light bulb lights. And that is my standard. That is what I'm going to compare every single other circuit to. Okay, now the key is as we add other components, like you can see across the table, we're going to add cells and we're going to add bulbs. There's going to be positives and negatives to each and every one. Okay, and some you're going to be able to see whether the light bulb is brighter or dimmer. That's going to be pretty easy for you to identify how it's different. But some of them you're not going to actually be able to see. Instead, the only thing you're going to be able to do is make a conclusion based off of what is not seen. And we'll kind of get into that. So the first one that I want to talk about is what if I take my standard circuit and I want to add another cell, okay? And we're going to kind of move all the way over to this end of the table. And I'm going to bring my standard with me. Apparently I'm bringing the table too. And what I have here is I have my standard cell and a very similar setup. I have this loop, one continuous loop. We call it a series. And what happens is the energy from this cell runs out the negative side, across into the positive of this cell, out the negative, through the bulb, and back through. It continues and continues. And it will light up once I place them in. I want you to take a quick moment. I have two cells, one light bulb. What do you think is going to happen to the light bulb? All right, let's give it a shot. Oop, nothing happened yet. Oh, that's because this also needs to be completed. When a break along this line happens, it's not going to work. So, let's see. Whoa! Look at that light! That is like a fireball inside that flashlight, or in that light bulb. We can tell when comparing light bulbs that this one is definitely brighter. And you might ask yourself, yeah, so it's brighter. What else do I know? Well, I can make a prediction that not only is this brighter, but being mathematically specific, this is 2 times brighter than our standard. 2 times brighter than our standard. So let's try to write this. 2 times bright. All right, and that's related to our standard, okay? So if our filament is burning 2 times brighter, there has to be a con by that. And I think back to a fire pit, right? I don't know if you guys have ever had a campfire before, but if you have a piece of wood, and that wood, you put it into a small fire, that piece of wood will last a long time. If I put that piece of wood into a big bonfire, there's a lot more heat and a lot more energy, and that wood is not going to last as long, okay? There's heat from all over the place, and the heat is more increased. In this situation, our filament is dealing with a lot more energy running through it. And we heard from the Nikon wire that it's a delicate wire. So there is a certain amount of life in that filament. And with having 2 times the more energy, we can actually predict that this filament is going to last half as long. I will need to take this light bulb, switch it out, and put another light bulb in to have the amount of effect on the filament as our standard, okay? So it lasts half as long, or I would need 2 times the number of light bulbs because it's burning up so much quicker. So bulb would be half as long. All right, so let's move all the way over to not cells in series, but let's go look at bulbs in series. Now, bulbs in series, you'll notice that there is a similar setup. It has that same loop, but instead of our 2 cells and 1 bulb, we have 2 bulbs and 1 cell. I'm trying to think to myself, what is going to happen? When I took my standard with 1 bulb, 1 cell, it had a certain amount of brightness. When I added an extra cell, the bulb got brighter. So what happens when I don't change the amount of energy, but I have 2 bulbs? Oh man, I might have to have Miss Frank zoom in. The light bulbs are lit, but they are very, very dim. And you might ask yourself, how dim? If you guessed half as dim, you are correct. And it's hard to visually identify if it's half as dim, but I'll lift this up and see if you can see the little filament. There's just a tiny glow. It's kind of hard to get started, and that's okay. But what happens here is it is lit, but this cell is putting out half of its energy here and half of its energy there. Oh, Miss Frank's going to bring it up to the camera. All right, so with this energy almost splitting double duty, it doesn't have any more energy. It just routes it through and it spreads it. It's kind of like if you get a bag of M&Ms and you eat them yourself, you get all of that bag. But if your sister is told that she has to have some too, you kind of have to split it in half. That's really the bulbs in series situation. So we know that the bulbs are going to be approximately half as bright as our standard. And I'm trying to figure out what in the world would be useful here. How could we actually use this? Well, with a little bit more energy source, having a lot of dim lights is not a bad thing. We have for holiday lights or night lights. We have, sorry, Mrs. Rogers, we have lights in our driveway so that someone doesn't run their car into the side of our driveway when it's dark out. It doesn't have to be a lot of light, just has to let you know where to go. Even planes, for their runways, have lights that go around that don't have to be super bright because you only use them in the dark and they'll shine anyway. So I'm trying to see if my filament is burning or my bulb is burning half as bright, what could be a positive? Well, honestly, if the filament's only burning half as bright, we knew that over in the cells in series, when it burned 2 times as bright, the bulbs lasted half as long. So what happens if it's burning half as bright? The filament or the bulb will last 2 times as long. And if you forgot, 2 times as long as our standard circuit. So these filaments, as they are, we could expect them to last 2 times longer than this bulb. Let's just pause real quick and think about this mathematically. Say we said that this bulb in our standard lasts for 2 hours. If this bulb lasts for 2 hours, how long could this bulb last if it's going to last half as long? Well, half of 2 would be 1. So I would expect this bulb to last for 1 hour compared to this bulb lasting 2 hours. Now in our bulbs in series, when they're lasting 2 times as long as our standard, our bulbs could light for 4 hours. That's a pretty cool thing. If you need your bulbs to last a long time, you have expensive light bulbs, the idea of having bulbs last a long time might be something you're looking for, or if you just need some dim light. Now over here, if you really need a spotlight or a flashlight, you need it to be super bright, you're gonna sacrifice the bulb to have the illumination, okay? So let's move into the two most interesting leftover circuits, okay? So we've got half as bright, 2 times as bright. Let's go over to the cells in parallel. Now, the cells in parallel is a super interesting circuit. And I'm going to bring our standard over so you can compare. You ready? Let's put this one in first. Now, what I want to point out is I used the Fahrenstock clip in the middle cell holder to hold both wires, one going this way and one going this way. So let's see what happens when we put this one in. Whoa! Oh, if you notice, the light bulb lit from this cell going in all the way here. That's interesting. When I added one cell from my series circuit, it did not light. But this one did. Interesting. Well, I would assume when I put this other bulb or this other cell in that this is going to get brighter. Let's see. You ready? Not really. I right now have 2 cells connected at equal brightness of the standard. Now, I can't easily see what's going on here, but what I can conclude is that I have enough energy coming from the cells to be equal to the energy of one cell. Now, I am not a battery and I never have been, so I don't know how much energy is leaving, but similar to in our bulbs in series, the cell split its energy into 2. It sure seems that the cells are talking to each other and saying, hey, I'll send half the amount of energy and I will send half the amount of energy to get the same brightness. So the positive in cells in parallel is the cells last 2 times longer than the standard. What's interesting, and we'll come back to this in a moment, when one of these cells dies, we have another entire cell to push energy out. Now you might say, what is the negative? Unfortunately, cells are expensive. They are not cheap. So the idea of getting 2 cells to achieve the same brightness as one cell kind of seems silly. But if we want it to last as long as possible, that's the circuit for you. So our negative is moolah, the money. That's a bummer, right? It costs a lot, but it lasts a long time. All right, are you ready for our last circuit? Let's do it. So we have bulbs in parallel. The last time we talked about bulbs, multiple bulbs in one cell, we knew that half the energy was split between the 2 bulbs. Let's see what happens when I add my cell. Whoa. Now, I don't know if you notice, but that's the same brightness as our standard. But not only do we have 1, but 2 lights at the same brightness of our standard. That's pretty cool. So what in the world is going on here? Well, I think a positive is more light. And I did something poor. I didn't use a number. How much more light? I've got 2 times the number of bulbs at the standard brightness. So maybe we want to have multiple lights in a string, maybe like a holiday light, right? That as it goes through, we have a significant amount of light in a series, which I shouldn't use that word, but in a string that have a significant amount of brightness. This is a really hard one. If we have one cell and two bulbs at the equal brightness of our standard, the negative is this cell is sending one complete standard circuit worth of energy and another complete standard circuit. So the cell, we can conclude, will last half as long. Testing my upside down writing skills. Don't judge the handwriting. Now I want to point out one last thing. You'll notice in each and every one of these examples, we have a positive and negative missing without an answer. Now, one thing you saw earlier is when, oops, I screwed the table again. One thing we noticed earlier is there are, and I don't know if you picked up on it, if I have the word series, I have two negatives. If I have the word parallel, we have two positives. In general, there is a positive when dealing with parallel circuits that would be a negative in series circuits. And here's what it is. I don't know if you remembered, but we put one cell in and our light bulb did not light over here. We put one cell in here and our light bulb lit. Which means, unfortunately, if one of our extra items dies, this light bulb goes out. We say if one goes out, it all goes out. Okay? Same, if I unscrew this bulb, what happens is this light, I know you couldn't really see it, this light is out, which also means it's all out. This is very similar to stringing up lights. If one cell goes out, the entire strand goes out, and you have to figure out which part, which single bulb went wrong. So that can be frustrating. You almost throw out an entire series because of one thing going wrong. The difference is, if we come over to the parallel setup, say this cell dies, we're still running. That's pretty cool. What happens if this one dies? Oh, still running. So it will run even if one of the cells is removed. Over here, if one of our filament dies, you guessed it, it keeps running. We call the parallel the Energizer bunnies. They just keep on going, right? They last and last and last. They don't give extreme brightness, but they last. If I take this one out, the other one is still running. Because we have two separate standard, this one's a longer, but standard circuits. That is what's going on in these circuit types. Okay? So, a quick recap. Everything is compared back to our standard circuit and its brightness. If the filament is burning bright, we know the filament is going to last half as long. If the filament's not burning bright, it's going to last 2 times longer. And our parallel circuits are kind of like our reserves, backups, right? This and this will last a long time, even though they don't give you an intense amount of brightness. So, what I will leave you with are nicknames. Are you ready for them? Cells in series. That is your flashlight. It lights super, super bright. Our cells in parallel. That is our zombie apocalypse. We're stuck in the woods and we need light, but we need to last for a long, long time. We obviously have our standard circuit. our bulbs in series. That's our night light. You don't want it too bright. You just need to see so you don't bump into the hallway, into the wall when you're trying to use the restroom in the middle of the night. And our bulbs in parallel, well, those are our fancy holiday lights where one bulb can die and the rest of the line still works. See you guys next time.